Here's something nobody talks about. Some people don't lose friends because they're bad at relationships. They lose them because they refuse to pretend. And in a world built on performance, that honesty becomes their loneliest weapon. If you've ever watched friendships fade, not through conflict, but through quiet distance, you already know what I'm talking about. No dramatic falling out, no betrayal, just a slow, inevitable drift where texts go unanswered, plans stop forming, and eventually you stop being part of anyone's story. But here's what psychology reveals. People who don't keep friends aren't necessarily struggling with social skills. They're struggling with something far more complex, the inability to maintain connections that feel artificial. Let me explain. First, they operate on a different frequency of consistency. Most friendships survive through routine contact, quick texts, casual meetups, the surface-level check-ins. It's the social glue that keeps people bonded. But people who don't keep friends often can't maintain that rhythm, not because they're lazy, but because their brain doesn't register those interactions as meaningful enough to prioritize. So they disappear for weeks, assuming real friendship should survive silence. But most people interpret silence as disinterest, and slowly they stop reaching out. You don't ghost people intentionally. You just forget that relationships need feeding even when you're not hungry. Second, they have a pattern recognition problem that ruins trust. People who don't keep friends are often hyper-aware of behavioral inconsistencies. They notice when someone's words don't match their actions, when enthusiasm feels forced, when loyalty exists only in convenience. This trait is rooted in high threat sensitivity, a psychological mechanism where your brain constantly scans for signs of betrayal or insincerity. It's exhausting because once you spot a crack in someone's character, you can't unsee it. You start pulling back before they even realize you've noticed. The irony? Most people aren't being malicious, they're just being human, imperfect, occasionally selfish, inconsistent. But your brain treats inconsistency like danger. So you withdraw, not out of judgment, but out of self-preservation. And here's the part most people don't know. This pattern often begins in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where affection was unpredictable, where closeness came with conditions, your nervous system learned to expect disappointment. So now, even with good people, your brain whispers, "Don't get too comfortable, they'll leave eventually." Third, they mistake emotional endurance for connection. People who don't keep friends often confuse being low maintenance with being good at relationships. They pride themselves on not needing much, not asking for help, not demanding attention, not burdening others with emotions. But friendship isn't just about what you can endure alone. It's about mutual exchange. And when you never ask for anything, never show vulnerability, never let people feel needed, they eventually feel useless to you. This is identified as counterdependency, an attachment style where independence becomes a defense mechanism. You convince yourself you don't need anyone, so you never have to risk being let down. But people bond through need, through shared struggle, through the intimacy of being seen at your worst. When you refuse to let anyone in that deeply, they hover at the surface until they realize they'll never get closer. And then they drift. Fourth, they outgrow people faster than they replace them. If you're someone who constantly evolves, reading, learning, questioning your beliefs, you might find that old friendships stop fitting, not because you're better than anyone, but because your conversations no longer align. You're talking about existential purpose. They're talking about weekend plans. You're analyzing patterns. They're repeating the same complaints. And neither is wrong. You're just operating at different speeds of growth. But here's the trap. You assume that when you outgrow people, new ones will naturally appear. They rarely do, because the more you evolve, the fewer people match your frequency. So your circle shrinks, not through choice, but through natural selection. So what does this mean for you? If you're someone who doesn't keep friends, understand this. It's not about becoming more social. It's about becoming more intentional, about recognizing that real connection requires maintenance, vulnerability, and the willingness to let people matter even when it's uncomfortable. Because the people worth keeping aren't the ones who tolerate your distance. They're the ones who understand it and choose to stay anyway. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more psychology that doesn't sugarcoat the truth.